Hello, welcome again to FairTax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Molero.
And we are the FairTax Guys, coming to you recorded and in person on our weekly podcast here from a variety of different places, Spreaker and iTunes and a bunch of other places you can get it. Our free app as well.
That's
we haven't
right.
mentioned that in a while.
The free app is for both iPhones and Androids, and it's free. It's one of the easiest ways to listen to FairTax Power Radio.
Oh, yes, and it is totally free. Now, I'll tell you what, let me get into something that I mentioned last episode, and we ran out of time before we could do it, and that is our continual watch on Congress.gov.
Oh, yeah.
And how badly the Congress critters are monkeying with the tax code. And again, what we do, we will go to the Congress.gov where you can check out any kind of legislation, and you can filter your search down for certain things. And we will search on the string Internal Revenue Code, I mean those three words in quotation marks.
Yeah,
and
it has to be in quotes.
Yeah, it brings back all of the references, all the different bills that refer to the Internal Revenue Code. So this is a pretty good estimate of how many changes to the tax code the Congress critters are proposing. How many do you think we got now? It was like 830 last time we looked.
It's got to be getting close to 900.
874.
874. Oh, my gosh. You know,
and if I'm not mistaken, Congress is not in session as we're recording this.
As we're recording this,
those numbers are still going up, even though everybody's not there.
This episode is going to air in September, and we're trying to get ahead because of traveling schedules. But so by the time you hear this episode, if you go to Congress.gov and type in the search box, quote, Internal Revenue Code, close quote, it's likely to be over 900 by the time you hear this. And that shows that the income tax never stays stable. Congress is always trying to change it. Now, very few of those, thankfully, are actually going to become law. But still, there'll be enough changes. There's been an average of
more than one change per day over the past 10 years.
Yeah. Look at the when Reagan flattened out the tax code in 1986. I think it was 26,000 pages. Now we have around 75. It's almost 3 times the size that it was then. The income tax will never stay the same. You know, like the philosopher saying you can never step in the same stream twice because it's always changing. Same with the tax code. Unfortunately, they're changing. Even like as Bob said, even while they're away from Congress. Their staffers are busy filing tax proposals.
And just about every last one of them, you can bet, has got a lobbyist behind it.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, we need to get back into one of your favorite things to do here on FairTax Power Radio. We haven't done this in a while, although we have done it a good bit in the past, and that is taking a baseball bat to the head of the IRS. You've got something there that's pretty cool.
Yeah. This report here is from August 17th. And the headline, lay it on the line. Judge in Tea Party case orders IRS to disclose employee names and reasons. Oh, yes, Washington Times, August 17th. A federal judge on Thursday ordered the IRS to name the specific employees the agency blames for targeting Tea Party groups for intrusive scrutiny and said the government must prove it has ceased the targeting. So apparently the judge is not believing the IRS that they're actually coming forth, and they're not. The IRS is playing games with the judge, trying to slow up the process and everything. Judge Reggie B. Walton also said the IRS must explain the reasons for the delay for 38 groups that are part of the lawsuit in the District of Columbia, where they are still looking for a full accounting of their treatment.
Yeah, and let me toss this out again. We have done this in the past too. Those of you who are applauding the fact that the IRS is going after these Tea Party groups and saying, we need to get them, understand that the shoe could very well be on the other foot later, because if somebody comes after you because of your political beliefs, you don't want to do that. So we do not have a system. We do not need to have a system where political opposition, regardless of what position they're taking, where the IRS can be used as a weapon against people because of their politics and what they're thinking.
Yeah, we need a tax system that cannot be weaponized.
Yes, because if they're going after your enemy today, they may be coming after you later.
Oh,
we have seen that. Remember how Richard Nixon in his day, where the IRS was used against his political enemies.
It seems like, I don't know, a lot of administrations have used the IRS to get after their enemies.
Yes, and of course we don't need to get into the civil asset forfeiture.
Not again. We talked about that last week.
What you got?
Okay, now this one is from Politico.com. All right, veteran lobbyists see hard road ahead for reform. President Donald Trump wants to sign a tax bill in the fall, but lobbyists who were around the last time Congress overhauled the tax code, 1986, say plans to pass permanent, wide-reaching legislation with only Republican votes seems all but impossible. Some are pushing for Republicans to embrace a long-shot strategy to tie tax reform to an infrastructure spending package to bring Democrats on board. So that makes the tax package kind of an afterthought by attaching it to an infrastructure bill.
Oh, mercy. I just hate the completely polarized thing up there.
Yeah.
If it's your idea, nobody judges anything on the merits of any ideas anymore. It's judged on whose idea it is.
Yeah.
And if it comes from the other side of the aisle, it's a bad idea and you don't even think about it.
That is pretty sad.
That has got to stop. It really does.
Yeah. Others have given up hope that Congress will be able to pass anything more than a temporary tax cut for individuals. Maybe the measure that can attract 50 Republican votes in the Senate. All right, we'll end up with some lower tax rates, some business tax changes, and probably some tax cuts that are probably going to be temporary because we're doing it all with the Republican votes. Now, I frankly don't understand that, but this is from Randy Hardick, who worked for Senator Lloyd Benson back in 1986.
Oh, mercy.
The landmark tax legislation signed by President Reagan in 86 is the standard by which all other tax reform efforts are judged. And look what happened to that one. All right? If that's the standard, and the standard has been completely corrupted, what does that say about the standard? All right? So maybe we need to do something different. Here's the last paragraph in this report I'm going to read. The mere possibility of tax reform has been tantalizing enough to drive a booming tax lobbying. Lobbying firms have signed 355 contracts to lobby on taxes so far this year, according to Politico analysis of disclosure filings. That's more than double the 152 contracts signed at the same period last year. So the lobbyists are kicking in. Yep.
I tell you, that reminds you of something here that Steve Hayes wrote in his chairman's report here, that most lobbyists and the most money are spent on the pharmaceutical health issues, but tax issues is the second highest, thing on lobbyists.
Yeah. Yep. So
second highest lobbying activity happens on behalf of tax issues.
So the lobbyists are licking their chops over the idea of tax reform, because if they do manage to flatten out the tax code, simplify it a little bit, those lobbyists will be right back in there trying to unflatten it. I mean, as soon as they're finished, as soon as the Congress and the president sign the thing. So
yeah, and I think we got a really good insight into the thinking of some of these Congress critters here just in the past week here in Florida. One of our volunteers was at a town hall event with Senator Bill Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, I really don't want to get into this too deep, but Bill Nelson is just the typical swamp creature. He has been a professional politician his entire life at both the state level and the federal level, and he's just this kind of professional politician that has given us the tax code we've got now. And our FairTax volunteer asked him in that meeting, what about the FairTax? And Bill said, kind of paraphrasing here, ain't going to happen.
Yeah, how nice. Because they got their own.
That's the kind of attitude, that's the kind of mindset that we have to go up against and change.
Yeah. And folks, you'll note that we are, Bob and I are hard on people in either party. It doesn't make any difference to us. If they're swamp creatures, they're going to get it. So,
a swamp creature is someone who just goes up there and does his leadership's bidding. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle he sits on.
Yeah, that's right.
That describes Bill Nelson perfectly. That describes a lot of other Congress critters perfectly. They vote the way their leadership tells them to, with a lot of times without even considering the merits of the issue. If it's coming from the other side, vote against it. End of story.
Now, Bob, I've got
Yes.
a report here that's going to knock your socks off. You're going to say you did not see this one coming, all right? This is from the Washington Free Beacon, and it's dated August 20th. Majority of you in the U.S. say taxes are too high and the tax code is too complex. Well, I bet you never saw that one coming.
No, well, I'll tell you what, and I don't have any socks right now. Look at that. Hold my foot up to the microphone so you can see.
Let's try to stay on the subject here, Bob.
You brought it up.
70%, and here's the subtitle. This is interesting. 70% of Democrats want members of Congress to work in a bipartisan way to get tax reform done. Everybody wants real tax reform, but this Congress seems to be inept, and that's the nicest I'm going to put it.
Only trouble is that the varying factions up there have different ideas as to what tax reform ought to look like.
Yeah.
Because remember, these people, we've done this before, they are writing the tax code largely for their own benefit, not yours.
Yeah, that's right. And you can see where that's gotten us. Okay? A majority of American... Well, that just repeats the subtitle there. It's clear that Americans, regardless of ideology, widely support fixing our broken tax system, says Corey Bliss, director of the network American... I forget the name of the network here, and I lost it. Americans recognize the positive impact of a tax code with lower rates would have on working families and small businesses competing with other countries like China. A majority of all Americans, 57%, believe that the tax code needs to be overhauled or revamped in a major way. Another 62% of Republicans and 46% of Democrats say that their taxes are too high. Now, when you get this, Congress has got to be seeing this stuff. So, they keep horsing around with the same mamby-pamby little tax changes. As we've said before, the analogy is moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic and not doing anything. A majority of Democrats, 70%, say they want Congress members to work in bipartisan fashion. 77% of respondents believe that tax reform will impact them positively, whether it be through economic growth, increasing jobs, or helping out their own finances. And finally, Congress must capitalize on this opportunity to deliver meaningful tax reform that will create more jobs, cut taxes for working families, and empower job creators to compete with countries like China. To succeed and enable growth for all, every member of Congress must prioritize reform that lowers rates, eliminates loopholes, and puts American workers first. But what kind of tax reform are they talking about?
We are going to have to hold their feet to the fire.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Because when they say tax reform, they're talking about making changes to the current system, all right? Which, again, we saw that 31 years ago with when Reagan was the president. They made major changes to the tax system, the income tax, and look what we have now. 31 years later, we have a total mess, and the IRS is out of control. Why do we want to do that again? I mean, why don't we do some real tax reform, such as get rid of the income tax altogether and replace it with a sales tax, like a number of our states are already doing?
Amen. And so you've got to get to the swamp critters up there who just have it in their head. And I mentioned Bill Nelson a few minutes ago. And also, his response tells me that he knows about the FairTax.
Yeah.
A lot of folks will say, well, this just needs more research. I don't know too much about it. They know about the FairTax. We have been up there. Americans for Fair Taxation has been up there talking to legislators and Congress critters a long time. They know about it. Yeah. And they'll try to tell you that they don't. But they do, and we just need to keep hammering on this thing.
Yeah, that's right. We got to hold their feet to the fire. So there's another report from the Daily Signal that Paul Ryan calls for tax reform, letting Americans keep more of their own money.
Well, that's a good idea. I'll take that.
Yeah. So, well,
how about letting me keep everything that I earn, and then I'll decide how much tax I'll pay on what I spend? What do you think of that?
Boy, that's a pretty radical idea. Oh, wait a minute. That's the FairTax. Jeez. All right, so how are we going to make this happen? This episode is about what you can do, folks, and we have to enlist your support and your efforts. We need you to do something. Now, if you are a member of Americans for Fair Taxation, you can join without making a donation. We ask you to try to make some kind of a donation. I mean, as little as, I don't know, $5 or $10 or whatever. Anything you can contribute. But get on their mailing list, because if you do get on their mailing list, every Friday, Steve Hayes, who's the president and chairman of the board of AFFT, sends out a Fair Tax Friday and a chairman's report. Now, recently, back in August, his chairman's report was all about what you can do to help. And he spells it out. Now, if you've already seen this, bear with me. I'm going to read a few parts of it over again. But then I'm going to condense his suggestions into something that we can actually do on the radio. So, okay. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines lobby as to conduct activities aimed at influencing public officials and especially members of a legislative body on legislation. Well, we know all about lobbying. We've talked about that a lot, okay? Most lobbyists make a lot of money. There's an organization called MapLight, and they track all this stuff. The largest, the most money spent on lobbying is actually for pharmaceutical and health issues, and taxes next, right? Where Bob already mentioned that. So, and lobbyists already make huge amounts. Now, listen to this. Yep. According to MapLight analysis of federal lobbying records, multinational corporations and interest groups spent $14.4 billion during the last decade to influence lawmakers and officials. $14.4 billion on Congress critters to influence their vote, to get them to propose certain legislations or vote in a particular way. And, of course, a lot of that money is spent on what, Bob?
Oh, campaign contributions.
Yeah, campaign cash.
There's a point here real quick that Steve made in the previous paragraph that says about MapLight, predicting that if tax reform happens as it looks like it might, tax lobbyists stand to make the most money they have made in 3 decades. You've been saying this all along. Yeah. If they flatten out the tax code, if they try to make this, tinkering around the edges with the current system, the lobbyists will go right back to work, unflattening it, and charging their clients a good bit of money to do that.
Sure.
So this is the Tax Lobbyist Full Employment Act of 2017 is what they're talking about.
Yeah. The best thing that we could do for lobbyists is to flatten out the tax code. But they love the idea.
Question for you. Why do special interest groups spend money on lobbying to begin with?
Well, because they want, just like we are the Fair Tax, and because it works.
There you go.
Right? We lobby. Steve goes to Washington once a month at his own expense and lobbies for the Fair Tax. So we have all kinds of people. The difference is that those of us that are working for the Fair Tax, we're all volunteers, and we don't get paid to do this. In fact, Steve is doing the opposite. He is spending his own money in order to go to Washington. That's how serious he is about getting this done.
Yes, thank you, Steve.
Yeah. So, the lobbying works, and that's why people do it. Okay. There's one last thing here. While many Fair Tax supporters are also lobbyists, well, this is what I just said, because we are seeking to get Congress and the President to pass the Fair Tax, we differ in significant ways from quote-unquote real lobbyists. We don't get paid, and many of us even pay our own expenses when lobbying. Yeah, okay. So there is a difference. Everybody in the Fair Tax organization is a volunteer. Yep. Everybody.
So, folks, we are calling on you to help contact your Congress critters. And let me give you a couple of really good talking points you can use if you go to their town halls, if you write them an email, if you write a letter to the editor that they read, anything like that. Hit them on the evasion issue. I am convinced that evasion is going to sink the income tax system eventually.
Absolutely.
Because it's taking on water now, and we're kind of going down by the bow. But it won't be too long before you look just like the Titanic with the back end of the boat up out of the water and straight down you go. But evasion, it's incredible how much evasion takes place with the income tax, because the system, you could not design a tax system that is any more prone to evasion than the income tax. Because you're supposed to report how much you make. You're supposed to be honest when you do it. And if you get paid in cash, you're really supposed to report that, and you don't. So the system is what stinks. We need to get rid of it, and evasion is going to sink it. So make that point. Ask them, why do you continue to support a system where there are literally billions, soon to be trillions of dollars worth of evasion taking place, and look at the blank stare you'll get back.
Yeah. You know who the most honest people, honest taxpayers are in the country? Fair tax people.
Yeah, I know it's not IRS employees.
No, because we don't want to risk the wrath of the IRS because, like we said before, they just don't give a hoot about the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, but think about it. If you're evading the income tax, you are also evading the payroll taxes that support Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah. Now, what are the evasion costs? I mean, we've been talking about the evasion problem, but let's put some dollar numbers for it. In 2017, all right, first off, this is a research done by Dr. Richard Sebula. I hope I pronounced that right. Cebula, PhD from Jacksonville University, right here in good old Jacksonville, Florida. And he completed it on March the 1st, submitted this. Now, the AFFT raised a bunch of money so Dr. Sebula could do this. And I think it was like $25,000 because these things require a lot of work. And it's a 56-page document, and when you look at it, you think, oh my God, only a PhD economist can actually digest this stuff. But there's some very interesting. I went through it, and I did not read the whole 56 because I'm still sane. But I did pull some interesting figures out of here. Right now, 2017, the estimated tax evasion is $693 billion. That's money that's not going to the IRS that should be, but people are illegally evading their responsibility in paying taxes.
How much is that per household?
That is, and he's figured it out per household, $5,365 per household. Now, how does that one get you? Your household is paying an extra $5,365 because there are a lot of people who are evading the tax code. Let that sink in. $5,365 that you and your family are paying extra because there are people in this country not obeying the tax laws.
There are fewer and fewer traditional people who work for wages and receive a W-2 at the end of the year. There are a lot of folks that have, eBay stores and Uber drivers. We've been using that for a long time. We've got a lot of people who kind of make money, quote, off the grid. And they don't report it because they don't have to, because nobody's going to tell on them if they don't. So this evasion is what is really going to sink the system. So if we stay with this income tax and the evasion rate continues the way it's been going, the only way to bring it under control is greater enforcement.
Oh, yeah.
More auditors, and that means more hassle for honest taxpayers, less efficiency in collecting it because you got to put all this money into the collection and enforcement thing of it.
Dr. Sebula has extrapolated ahead about 10 years, too. So he went up to 2026. And it's $693 billion a year now. In 2026, he is predicting that it'll be $1.1 trillion for the year 2026. That's $1.1 trillion that's not going to the federal coffers that should be if we stay with the income tax. And he's projected the increase in the population. That's what these PhD economists do. They take into account all this stuff. And even with the increased population, that amounts to $8,525 per household. That means
that tells you the evasion rate is growing faster than the population.
That's right. And it is. The evasion rate is growing faster than the population or the GDP. So people are getting very good at evading the tax code, the income tax, because it's a terrible tax. And people don't like being taxed on their hard work and their productivity.
Well, now, Congress is going the other way with IRS funding. And some people would say that's a wonderful idea to give the IRS less money, shrink that nasty, all-powerful agency. But when you do that, the flip side, it's harder and harder to catch the evaders.
Sure,
the whole system stinks. You need to get rid of it.
Because of the cuts, the budget cuts to the IRS, they're doing 0.7% of audits. In order to keep up with this increased evasion, they would have to increase that to 2%. All right, and of course they don't know who's evading. Well, that's a sample.
Yeah.
All right. And when people start getting arrested and going to jail because they're evading the tax code, like Al Capone, other people will start getting serious and say, maybe I better do something here. So right now Congress is going in the wrong way because they're reducing the budget to the IRS, which we might think is a good idea, but the evasion keeps getting worse, and they're getting farther away from it. They're not going to be able to control it unless they start hiring thousands of more IRS agents and conducting thousands of more audits, which means innocent taxpayers like Bob and I will get caught up in this because they don't know who's evading. They just do a sample of people. And then everybody gets caught up into it. 80% of the people that they will audit will be absolutely 100% honest taxpayers.
Okay. So if you want to talk to your Congress critter, hit on the evasion point. You can also hit them on stability.
Yeah, stability. I mean, we talked about this.
That is the one thing that business hates is instability.
Yeah, they're not
going to hire. They're not going to build more plants. They're not going to do things that will help the economy and help the people that work for them if there's cloudiness in the future as to what the government's going to do on tax policy. So we need to make the tax code a lot more stable than it is right now. Again, we're talking almost 900 proposed changes in this Congress alone.
Yeah. So this is what we need your help. You need to call Congress, either their office in Washington or your local office, and ask them, use these figures. I understand it's kind of hard to throw figures over the radio, but you need to look this stuff up. I mean, if you want to read if you really like to read that stuff, you can go to fairtax.org, click the research button on the main page, and the drop down, the first item is evasion. And that page will give you this link. It's a PDF on their website. I mean, if you really like numbers, this is going to be a good read for you. But all that information is there. And it was all done with government figures. All right? All they did was
in other words, that's what they admit to. That might not be totally accurate.
So, anyways, it's a horrible problem. You have to nail your Congress critters on the evasion and the stability. You have to hold their feet to the fire. And we're asking you to become proactive. Get your feet wet. Get in there and call your Congress critters and ask them what they're doing about evasion and stability and why they're not co-sponsoring the FairTax. Yeah. If they are a co-sponsor, like my congressman is a co-sponsor, encourage them to talk to other congressmen. All right? Here in Florida, that's going to be our direction. Bob and I were involved in a conference call with our board of directors, and we're going to start working on increasing our leadership team, and the leadership teams are going to go after these Congress critters to try to get more co-sponsors.
Well, the bottom line is that any form of income tax is never going to be stable.
No, it's a mess.
Any form of income tax is going to be rampant with evasion.
That's right. Yeah.
And we've got to get rid of the whole system, or it's going to just collapse under its own weight.
Another way of looking at evasion, it's up around 20-25%. This is crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the only way to fix the system is to jerk it out by the roots and replace it with a fair tax.
That's right.
Much, much harder to evade, much more stable because you've got a much wider tax base.
Yep. And it'll help individuals. It'll really help businesses and so forth. And businesses create jobs. Remember, 70% of jobs in this country are created by small businesses. We need to help the small businesses. All right? We need to help them create jobs.
Well, we encourage you to talk to us at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook. Leave us a comment on Facebook. Catch our next Facebook Live. And as soon as we nail down a date for it, we'll let you know what that's all about.
Yep.
But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of FairTax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Reminding you once again that the FairTax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
FairTax is coming. Don't stand in the